I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. What did we tell you that MAGA stands for? Make attorneys get attorneys, or in this case, make attorneys retire before they lose their legal license. Remember Lin Wood, one of Donald Trump's lawyers who was pushing the big lie, who, along with Sidney Powell and others, filed completely vexatious and frivolous lawsuits for which they were all sanctioned for in states like Michigan and Wisconsin. Yeah, you remember Lin Wood, who not only spread the big lie, pushed election conspiracy theories over and over again, but continued to post these incredibly dangerous and bizarre QAnon messages over and over again. Remember that, Lin Wood? Well, Lin Wood has now requested formally from the State Bar of Georgia, the disciplinary authority that oversees the practice of law in the state. Lin Wood is saying, look, he just wants to resign from the practice of law. He understands that it's permanent. He understands that he will never practice law again, but he would rather resign than have the state bar, which is currently engaged in a disciplinary proceeding against him in Georgia. He'd rather resign than have the state bar make the finding that he was culpable and then revoke his license that way. So before they're even going to reach the finding to revoke his license, he's basically saying, you could have my license, go ahead and take it. Here is a letter that Lin Wood just sent to the State Bar of Georgia, and it references the disciplinary proceedings that are currently pending against him for all of his misconduct relating to aiding and abetting Donald Trump in election interference, spreading lies about the 2020 election, encouraging the January 6th insurrection, just spreading vulgar lies about like almost everybody. Here, this is the letter that was sent on July 4th, 2023. It's sent to Paula Frederick, the General Counsel of the State Bar of Georgia. Dear Miss Frederick and Mr. Elmore, pursuant to State Bar Rule 1-202F, I hereby request that I be permitted to transfer to retired status effective immediately. I understand that this request is unqualified, irrevocable, and permanent. I further understand and acknowledge that if granted retired status, I am prohibited from practicing law in the state and in any other state or jurisdiction, and that I may not apply for readmission. The State Bar of Georgia Counsel has confirmed that I may remain free to represent myself pro se now and in the future, as long as I do not use my bar number or the same L. Lin Wood PC in any such matter. I understand that because there are 2 disciplinary proceedings pending against me, and it lists the different disciplinary proceedings in Georgia, I may transfer to retired status only with the consent of the Office of the General Counsel. Given the current status of the 2 disciplinary proceedings pending against me, including the fact that by order number 20, the special master struck my answer and found me in default, and that the special master conducted an evidentiary proceeding on aggravation and mitigation of discipline on May 18th and 19th, 2023, I respectfully request that the Office of the General Counsel grant this request, sign Lin Wood. What Lin Wood is basically saying here is, because there hasn't been a final finding on culpability, I'm just going to retire before you make that finding. And one of the things he's also saying here as well, when he says I'm going to represent myself pro se, he's going to represent himself in the various cases going forward. So he's basically saying, look, the rest of my future as a lawyer, you can have my license. I'm not going to represent that I am a lawyer, but he's going to say that he's going to continue to be his own lawyer in various actions. And again, this has to receive the consent of the Office of the General Counsel. And if I'm the Office of the General Counsel, though, one of the things I'd be focused on, though, is I'd I'd zone in on that line where he says that he wants to represent himself pro se, because if he's going to be filing vexatious litigation on behalf of himself, not in his capacity as a lawyer, but just as an individual, and bringing these baseless cases, that needs to be addressed as well. He needs to be treated as a vexatious litigant and prevented from filing completely meritless litigation over and over and over again. Just to remind you, though, some things about Lin Wood's background. Lin Wood came to prominence representing Richard Jewell, who was the security guard falsely accused in the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing. You remember that? Lin Wood was the lawyer for Jewell. Before that, Lin Wood was a personal injury lawyer, graduated law school in 1977, was a personal injury lawyer. But that was the case in 1996 that really brought him to prominence. And then he started representing, I think, family members from the John Benet Ramsey case. He was the lawyer who I think was part of the team representing Kyle Rittenhouse in connection with some matters. But really, it was in 2020 where after Joe Biden won, Lin Wood was out there promoting these conspiracy theories on behalf of Donald Trump. Lin Wood falsely claimed that Trump actually won 70% of the vote. Would claim that there was a secret cabal of international communists, Chinese intelligence, and Republican officials had contrived to steal the election from Trump, right? And while that sounds absolutely insane, because it absolutely is, that's the stuff that Donald Trump posts, by the way, every single day on his social media company. It's the communists and the Marxists and the fascists who have stolen the election. By the way, Trump had this guy, Lin Wood and Sidney Powell, file lawsuits for him. This guy was representing Donald Trump in cases and was, and was sanctioned. So he and Sidney Powell litigated and lost cases in Wisconsin and Michigan. In 2020, Wood's social media activities also garnered considerable attention. He called for the imprisonment of Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp and called for the imprisonment of Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, based on the conspiracy that these individuals worked with the Chinese to help rig the vote for Biden. He made allegations that Chief Justice John Roberts this was some QAnon conspiracy about Chief Justice Roberts. He suggested that Vice President Mike Pence would, quote, face execution by firing squad, called for the arrest of then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for treason. Judge Craig A. Karsnitz of the Superior Court of Delaware revoked Wood's permission to appear pro hoc vice before the court, and the judge said there was no doubt that Wood's tweets were among the factors that incited the storming of the U.S. Capitol by the pro-Trump mob on January 6, 2021. On January 19, 2022, the Supreme Court of the state of Delaware vacated the lower court's revocation of Wood's pro hoc vice for abuse of discretion. The Delaware Supreme Court found that Karsnitz's lack of doubt regarding Wood's involvement in the January 6 to be conjecture, and found that not allowing Woods an opportunity to respond was an unfair process. You see, there, the court was actually helping him. But in August 2021, U.S. District Judge Linda Parker of the Eastern District of Michigan formally sanctioned Wood and Sidney Powell and said that they engaged in a, quote, historic and profound abuse of the judicial process, and sanctioned them $175,000, with $155,000 of it going to Detroit. Lin Wood is in a lawsuit with somebody named QAnon John, you can't make this stuff up, a former ally who is suing Lin Wood for defamation. You got QAnon John versus Lin Wood. You have Lin Wood's he's in a litigation with his former law firm, and he posts all these things on Telegram, these QAnon conspiracy theories about his old law firm. He goes, the Atlanta law firm, I'm not even going to read their name, They're he calls his old law firm a deep state CIA operative. And if you know to whom I refer, you know who is really behind the frivolous lawsuits filed against me by my old law firm, intended to fear me and intended to smear me with false statements. So he says his old law firm is associated with CIA operatives. I can go on and on and on, but it's as crazy as it gets. But, one thing, though, that I want to reflect on is what these views are. People are like, oh, you're attacking conservatives. Like this is just going after conservative speech. When was this about tax policy? Is this about small government? No. These views that like the Linwoods and the Sidney Powells and Donald Trumps and even to the Jim Jordans, the Matt Gaetz, all these MAGA Republicans we cover here, I'm sorry, those are not conservative views. Just because you say that's conservative, there's nothing conservative about that. It's crazy. It's fascist. And I think it's important that we do not allow that to just be called conservative and be treated as like, oh, just, that's one side of the argument. It's not. But there you have it, folks. Linwood says he wants to retire. MAGA, make attorneys get attorneys, make attorneys lose their legal license. We see it right here. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 1.5 million subscribers. Thanks to your support. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Wherever you get audio podcasts, subscribe to the MeidasTouch podcast. Have an excellent day.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.